Getting it real with Wong Chin Huat on the hottest topics, frank, engaging and candid. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. All indications show that Perikatan Nasional will win big in Kedah, Kelantan and Terengganu. Will the green wave turn into a tsunami and lead to the capture of Selangor by Perikatan Nasional? Let's hear it from Professor Dr. Wong Chin Huat, a political scientist from Sunway University. Salam bahagia Malaysia. To followers around the world, welcome to this RealChunWai show again. Our guest today is Professor Dr. Wong Chin Huat, a political scientist from Sunway University. The Malaysian political temperature has gone up with these 6 state elections, and that there's been a lot of speculations and how it's going to turn out, but we are still about 10 days away. So it's going to be a long 10 days as far as politics are concerned. Now, Dr. Wong, we will just start off our conversation. It'd be better if I call you Chin Huat. Is it all right?
Yes, please do. Please do. Please do.
Okay. Now, let's dive into the conversation. Why are these 6 state elections so important? Some of the voters feel that, look, they are suffering from political fatigue. We just had the general election 8 months ago, and we can see from the attendance at Jeramas, they are not really big, except for the one in Kelantan, where there was a huge gathering, and when Mahato and Hadi spoke. But generally across the other states, the attendance have not been really great. Why is there this lack of response? And even some political leaders are getting a bit worried. Would people actually come out to vote? Okay. Now, why would this state polls be important for Malaysia?
Thank you, Chunwai, for having me. First of all, we need to see this is actually a 3-in-1 elections. On the surface, we are electing for state governments, and buy one, get one free, you get your state local council as well. So we are talking about not just 245 other seats to be filled, and 6 offices of chief minister and around 60 EXCO members. But we are also talking somewhere around, I think, more than 50s over local council. So, but the last one is actually federal government. I want to correct this perception that some people think that this is actually a referendum. It is not actually a referendum if we think about referendums as a mechanism with binding impact. Now, this is not.
Sure.
But it would be right to call this as a windcock, barometer, thermometer, whatsoever you want to call it, some sort, right?
Yeah.
That would be true, because this is actually a way for us to feel the temperature, the approval of the federal government. So that's the reason why this is important. It's the first time that we have this as a mid-election. It's very common in countries like America, but in Malaysia, this is the first time. And it is actually a good thing, because in most parliamentary system, where you have federal and state governments, they tend to have elections held at different times. But in Malaysia, it has always been simultaneous. So this come as a shock, and why? Well, it is important that people are not excited. You have explained it partly because this come immediately just 9 months after the last election, but also that I think a party has emerged to challenge all the existing party now. If we look at it, we would think that, so this is basically 3 big parties and 1 small one. The 3 big one, of course, is PH and PN on one side, then PN on the other side. The small one is Mudah. But I would say there's actually another party, and this is a party that's threatening all of them, making the party leaders you mentioned uneasy. That party is what I call Parti Aku Malas Undi, PAMU. People do not want to come out to vote because they cannot find reason to come out to vote. Partly, politics have changed so much that it makes it very hard for most people to catch up. Now, the reason why it's hard to catch up because that our elites are half caught in the past. They are responding, reacting to it, but they do not come out with a convincing narrative to help people to understand what happened and to move on. So you have many people find that they can no longer trust the political leaders because politics is no longer black and white. Your enemies are now friends, friends are enemies. So confusion is the correct response. But to get people to go out to vote so that they would not become card-carrying members of PAMU, so to speak, you need a little bit more frank and candid discussions on politics, and yeah.
So a few things that we have got to recap here, because this is unprecedented in the country's history. So we have a 6 states having their simultaneous elections for the first time. 6 states, okay, after the general election, and of course, it's just 9 months after the general election. And the last point here is very important because just 9 months ago, we have the Barisan Nasional and the Pakatan fighting each other. And now they are together as one coalition. So these are the interesting facts to think about. You mentioned use the word barometer instead of referendum. What does it really mean for Anwar Ibrahim? 9 months after becoming Prime Minister, now working with UMNO, and also what does it mean for Zahid? Because that the crucial Malay votes are really in his hands. Can he deliver or he cannot deliver? If he cannot deliver, what happens? Please.
Well, it would be very important for UMNO to show that it can survive. What we can imagine the worst scenario is that if UMNOs get wiped out in Selangor and Penang, which unlikely to happen in Negeri Sembilan, it can be badly damaged. But if it happened in Selangor and Penang, that would be very bad. The context of saying that is basically I do not expect miracles for UMNO in Kelantan, Terengganu, and Kedah. So if they get right out there, you can always excuse and say, there's too little to be done in 9 months. Now, problem with these two states then is UMNO may sink into a shock that G16 would be its dome days. That's how Bersatu fell in after the Tanjung PI by-election in 2019, November 2019. And its response then was try to move the government to the right by sidelining PKR and DAP, which eventually turned out to end in the Sheraton move. And so if UMNO were to get in that shock, the first response would have been much more reasonable, is to change the party leadership, including asking that important questions of soul searching. How can UMNO come back after losing 2 elections? No one has done that job because it's the same old leadership in place. Now, unfortunately, if you have a chance to do this, then it probably helped the party to rethink and how to come back. Unfortunately, this is unlikely because Zahid is controlling the party. So it's very likely Zahid wants to suppress and say any questions that the bad performance has to do with the leadership failure, the failure of the party to reflect and reinvent itself, but they will try to blame it on the external factor, which is the Bersatu response, that the government has to move to the right. Now, if the government is pushed to move to the right, of course, it would be at the disadvantage of DAP and PKR. They might give in a little bit at the beginning, but there would be a limit because once you give in, PN would push UMNO to go further, up to the point that this government would be caught in infighting. That was roughly the situation you felt before 2 months before Sheraton move, right? So it would be a bad situation for the government. That's, of course, the worst scenario. But things could have been different. Yeah.
So, Chin Huat, if you look at UMNO, the votes against UMNO, its popularity has actually declined over the last 2 elections. It was not something that happened in the last election. It has been declining. If you look at the figures and the statistics, and here, of course, we like to look at data rather than just a coffee shop talk. it has actually been declining. Now, with Zahid pushing up his opponents, yes, make it worse. The reason why Bersatu came about is also as an offshoot of UMNO. Now, if it does badly, and of course, the position of Zahid will be in question. Now, UMNO seems to have ended up in a position like in MCA where you cannot deliver the Chinese votes. Now UMNO cannot deliver the Malay votes. As you say that, I think maybe can briefly admit that as far as Kelantan, Kedah and Terengganu is concerned, I think PAS especially for PN would do very well. So let's just leave Penang, Negeri Sembilan, and Selangor. Selangor, of course, is the jewel in the crown. And if you look at the numbers, 56 states in Selangor. Simple majority will be 29, two-thirds will be 37. There's no way that PH can get the numbers that they had previously. I think that's quite safe to assume. So the focus in Selangor. From your reading, if there's a shift towards PN, whether we call it a green wave, whether we call it a Malay wave or a Malay tsunami, whatever we call it, there are evidence on the ground that the Malay votes are shifting towards PN. So how, in the case of Selangor, what kind of percentage do we talk about before PN can make any real difference in capturing Selangor? How much of a Malay turnout does it need? And even if there's a huge Malay turnout, they must also, of course, actually they vote for PN. Turnout is one thing, voting is another thing. How are you looking at this scenario in Selangor?
Well, I think the question here we are looking at is transferability. If you, in the last election, if you replay the last election, G15 result on Selangor, assuming that uh, the three parties, three coalition supporters vote again, no new voters, no others, and so on, and full transferability between BN and PH would ensure nearly 51 seats in Selangor, right? So the reason why it does not happen is that you fail to have that transferability, and mainly will be from UMNO to PH. And some UMNO to UMNO itself that you cannot retain, they will just go to PN. Less so on PH side uh, to UMNO.
Yep.
But what you would expect of all the three coalitions is that there will be a high percentage of transferability towards PAMU. People just do not come out to vote. So
Yeah.
I would assume that, so when we think about the turnout, it's not about exactly how many percentage of the turnout you want to aggregate, but rather how many percent of the old turnout would come from G15, right? How many percent of them would continue to come out to vote? I would expect that PN probably can retain up to perhaps 80%.
Mm-hmm.
And for UMNO, there might be a good chance that only 50% come out and support the government, and then maybe a quarter going to PN and a quarter stay back at home. And
Yeah.
if that kind of situations,
Mm.
and for PH, the other questionable part is also PH, because PH turnout could be low. You don't expect much PH would going to PN, but if they stay back at home, they go PAMU, that's bad enough. You can
Yeah.
have, if you have a low turnout of say about 50%, right? There's a possibility seats like uh Sungai Pere, Tanjung, Sepat, all these were actually DAP seats. There's a small
Yeah.
chance they may even flip. So it is
Mm.
a whole question here of what's the turnout. But if the turnout is high, and in some marginal seats, it would actually help PKR and Amanah to float.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, what there are concerns over the last 48 hours
Mm,
that the Chinese turnout
mm,
may not be too high.
yeah.
Uh, and they felt that, especially coming from PH leaders, so
Mm,
this is disquiet that, look, if there's no Chinese turnout of at least 60% or 65%, then the Selangor could be in trouble
yeah.
as far as the PH concerned.
Yeah.
Uh, how would the Chinese voters matter here? And what kind of role would it be playing to stop this tsunami from coming if it happens in Selangor?
I think that the problems that why you see such apathy among Chinese voters has to do with earlier uh, attitude of some people that the Chinese votes are already in PH pocket. That's not true. People just think that PH votes cannot go to PN. They forget PAMU. So today the biggest enemy for PH is PAMU because people just cannot find a reason to go out to vote. And partly it has to do with the whole government respond to this. I mean, we see the government have been trying very hard. And many people understand that, okay, there are a lot of constraints that this government face. However, that's not enough for you to get excited. This is why at the early stage, I took a very different positions on Mudah coming into fray. I say that if Mudah play that game well, it make the election campaign a bit more exciting. You may actually help to bring out the turnout because now the situation is just go out to sustain status quo. Why? After sustaining this, so that we will not get past coming into power. Now all these are actually negative motivation do this so that it wouldn't get worse. But people need a little bit more exciting things. Now, to make the matter worse is that you could see even a tough situation now, I'm not talking about Selangor, but like in Penang, you still see parties changing their candidates as if like they are in a very safe situation. I think there's a little bit too much of uh, arrogance or self-containment that people do not take the challenge serious enough.
I agree with you, Chin Huat. There's this current perception and assumption among the Chinese voters that look, whether I go out to vote in the Damansara Utama or Kota Damansara does not make much difference because the perception is that, look, these seats will be won by the DAP or PKR.
Yeah.
For sure, for sure. So my one extra vote is not going to make a difference in Chinese predominant area. The DAP will get the votes. But in mixed seats, like Kota Damansara is a mixed seat.
Yeah.
And in other areas, this is where the Chinese votes would make a lot of difference in deciding whether it's PN or PH. Now, you say that the narrative is that, look, if you vote for PH, then you will stop the past from moving on to. I think they've been trying to say, look, you got to stop Selangor from becoming another Kelantan.
Yeah.
But you say that it has got to be more than that, okay?
Yes.
So, in your opinion, what would be more than that to inspire and to encourage the non-believers from come out to vote?
At this stage now, it's a little bit tough. I think it comes down to how the party leaders would bring themselves to talk to people, let people see that why every vote is important. And there needs a little bit more of, I would say, beyond the efforts of the party, a more candid discussions on where this country is going.
Yeah, I agree.
We have not had enough of that. I'm really not sure whether 10 days would be enough to open that up, right? But
I agree with that.
we need to have a little bit of this because people are assuming that you could you can actually run a post-election collation in election as if this is a permanent election, right? And the biggest catch was, of course, in transferability. And if we go back to look at, we go back a little bit on, you mentioned just now, you compare UMNO to MCA. Completely agree. And the biggest problem with parties like UMNO is that it's supposed to be a nationalist party, just like MCA.
Yeah.
But now playing second fiddle to a larger party, as if like you're begging for breadcrumbs from your Abang Sulong. And that hurts the party standing in its own base. Now, all this issue is what needs to be dealt with. And DAP face similar problem, not as bad. DAP problem is like some people call it MCA 2.0, but DAP is definitely much stronger than and MCA as its high after 1969, right? But and DAP has been very responsible, very strategic. I think DAP is very lucky to have Anthony Loke as a leader. But overall, that doesn't help the transitions on the ground. People cannot find a reason why they need to do so. And what the government perhaps could have been done earlier is to make voting easy, letting people know when election is months ahead, allowing people to vote where they are without coming back. All this would have reduced the cost of voting. We didn't see any of this happening. We
Yeah.
do not see government a little bit uh, smarter in playing up some kind of crisis narrative that this country has so much crisis that we have to face. Let's work on together. But rather, you see uh, on one hand, is playing very safe that, okay, everything is okay. Unfortunately, half of the population decided the country is not okay, so it doesn't
Yeah.
appeal to them.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, the government spent a lot of time attacking old enemies and so on. I think overall, you lack sort of a wow factor. What can
Yeah.
excite us? It's good to have this conversation because in 10 days' time, you still can see things
Yeah.
changing. If you look back
Right.
in 2008, I remember the first week of campaigning. I really could not see which side is attacking, which side was defending. But on the second week, suddenly things become very clear, right? So
Yeah.
to have a candid discussion at this stage is good. But I have
That.
no magic solution.
Right. Chuan, the economy Badani plans have finally been unveiled,
Yeah.
but after about 9 months, I wish that it would have been launched much earlier, at
Yes.
least 2, 3 months ahead.
Yeah.
Then it would not be seen as something that you want to launch because of the state elections, okay? And also, when it comes to plans of this nature, where it involves a lot of structural problems, it takes time for it to be crunched in simple narrative that people could understand. Takes a 2 months, not takes 2 months, not 2 weeks for people to understand and grasp it into their mind.
Yeah.
Economic matters are not sexy issues,
Yeah.
but not like relief comic jokes you speak in drama. It won't get nobody will get excited. But finally we see a real plan.
Yes.
Finally,
Yes.
see a real plan, and most people felt that this economy banana is actually a good plan.
Yes.
The only thing is that the execution is always the toughest part.
Yes.
Um, I don't see much of this being really explained in simple manner in PH Drama.
Yeah.
I watched Wong Chen from Subang Jaya. He tried a bit of it. It was
Yeah.
quite commendable. And then when it comes to PN, there's almost no discussion on the economy matters. Although all of us agree that bread and butter issues are our main concern.
Yes.
It will
Yes.
have transcend all races and all
Yeah.
religion. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
but no one is speaking of these economy issues, and yet we say that bread and butter issues are the most
Yeah.
important. I wish that would. Speaking of economic, okay, I now want to turn to the Indian voters. They are the most marginalized. After 60 years, their household income is the lowest. Okay, and now suddenly, because of an article by Bridget Rash, everybody gets excited. Oh, suddenly they realize Indians do exist. Okay, now, can you share with us your thoughts on the Indian votes? Because they are look, and when you look at the figure, they make up about 10% of voters in 66 seats in Selangor,
Mm.
56% of the seats in Negeri Sembilan,
Mm.
55% in Penang,
Mm.
22% in Kedah.
Mm.
In Kota Raja, for example, in Selangor,
Mm.
Indian voters make up 40% of the electorate. And in Prai, Penang, 35%.
Yeah.
Suddenly, everybody wakes up at, oh, we need Indian votes. Your thoughts, please.
Yes, unfortunately, Indian votes have been sometimes ignored. But however you look at the wider survey, uh, Indian have always get representations in parties like PKI and DAP. And more than if you look at it, Indians do not constitute a majority in any singular seats, but they always get whenever you get a sizable numbers, then that's where they would be filled. So the larger question here is one of whether or not you how do we break free from this ethnic confine. I mean, everything is discussed, is debated in from an ethnic perspective. That Indians being minority from the state perspective, minority from the private sector perspective, that is to be ignored. But also, I think the other issue is the questions about leadership. You can see, I mean, we have had the dropping of Charles Santiago, one of very well respected Indian leaders from DAP, and now in a little more controversial case of Professor Ramasamy in Penang.
Yeah.
And there's these questions that whether when Indians find representative in political party, do they get to choose their own leaders or leaders are chosen for them? That's a little bit like going back to BN,
Yeah.
that was our MCA and MIC representing the Chinese and Indian in the government, or they're representing the government among the Chinese and the Indians.
Yeah. Right.
So it's good that they get more attention, but
Yes.
to really open all these things up, we might actually need to tweak our political system a bit. We need local elections. We need change our political system to have party lists, so
Yeah.
you can have more different parties bringing up different issues.
You mentioned about Mudah earlier.
Yeah.
So as you were speaking, I don't know why the Liberal Democrats of UK came across my mind. Okay,
Okay.
when the Lib Democrats started, they were not taken too seriously, but they seems to have managed quite well over the and of course, as far as Mudah is concerned, these people have got time on their side. They are young, and they can afford to make some mistakes here and there. They can try out new things. But there's also this very high possibility that their candidates will lose their deposit.
I
And also,
actually do not think time is on their side. There were people who
okay,
think that they should not contest this round, wait for G16. I think
okay,
they should have, because no one will give them chance. The reason being that as a whole, they are a threat to PKR. This
yeah,
is almost a backup, a spare tire for PKR.
yeah,
If PKR has failed, all other people, including DAP, would have invested in Mudah.
yeah,
And individually, it is a threat to the U wings of all other parties. So no one
correct,
wants to give them a chance.
yeah,
And the question here, and therefore they have to come in, otherwise they'll be just ignored. But to come in, their challenge is how to resist the temptation of just trying to carving out votes from PH, especially Chinese and highly mixed constituency. Reason being that this is easiest. They have overlapping electoral base, but that also makes them the natural spoiler for
yeah,
PH. In constituency like say Bandar Utama, in Bandar
yeah,
Utama, where you have the last time DAP won 80% of votes, there's no real threat that it would actually
yeah,
split the votes and deliver the victory to PM. However, it would be also very hard for you to keep that, right? Unless
yeah,
the turnout is low. Turnout is low is actually good for them because
yeah,
it will be easier for them to keep the deficit. On the other hand, if if they do not spread out to win votes beyond what PH can do, meaning to get votes from PM, a little bit from Umno, and to win votes from PAMU, they're
yeah,
not getting anywhere.
yeah,
I told some Muda leaders that if you think your best is to become DAP, you're not going anywhere.
yeah,
Because what you really need today from the progressive camp is a party that can actually re-articulate issues that can connect themselves to the Malay, especially Malay youths, without using the ethnic frame. So, for
yeah,
example, if we are talking about poverty, we're talking about even Indian issues. If all these things can be articulated as a generational
mm,
threat, how do we help young people like those who are
yeah,
now caught in gig economy because they have
mm-hmm,
no better options? Now, if you can excite all these people to come out to vote, it'll be a very different game. But
yeah,
unfortunately, looking at Muda placing 14 of 20 of its original candidates in PhDs, and most of them are almost all of them are multi-ethnic seats, right? You're
Yes.
not making that impact.
Yeah. Now that comes to the next question. Not making impact. Is Dr. Mahathir an asset to PN, or he's just been used by PAS to get the attention? Because I'm finding it very hard to understand Dr. Mahathir. As a journalist for 38 years and more, during my time when I was on the ground, I actually covered him a lot. Okay, I mean, he wrote books, he wrote articles about the importance of a multiracial country for the country's growth to move forward. He actually has written books. And now that I can see things have changed so much drastically, in the words of our friend Dennis Ignatius, he seems to have been taken over by the dark side, okay, which seems appropriate. Where does this Dr. Mahathir fit in for PN?
Well, I doubt he would carry more votes for PN more than Sanusi or all those Umno dissidents. They are grabbing him only for psychological gratification. To have your former arch enemy coming to your stage wearing your party jacket, of course, that made you feel good. It made you feel justified. But I don't think he really brings more support. And his language is really now an outcast. Look at how Sabahan call him. APCO former presidents Wilfred Madius Tangau call him Malayan colonialist, imperialist, because he say what kind of former prime minister would want to would have problem with the name of his own country, right? And this idea that we should go back to Tanah Melayu, you're assuming Sabah and Sarawak are just colonial possession to be absorbed by Tanah Melayu. I think he has gone very, very far. He's now far right. He doesn't help much, but I can understand why. Unfortunately, for someone like Dr. Mahathir, he simply lacks the ability to retire.
Yeah.
And that's tragic for him and for the
Correct.
country.
Yes. He could have just everyone must know when to let go and when to step down, and it would have been marvelous for the country and for himself. He have just remained as a statesman rather than to be continue as a politician right now. So, Chin Huat, I really appreciate that you share your thoughts with us today. We hope to have you back again over the next 14 days, midway and final lap. These are interesting times for Malaysia. I know many of us are tired of politics, but as you say that this is perfectly normal in a democracy in other countries. We'll just have to get used to it. You have talked about the local government elections. That's even more politics, okay? So we wish Malaysians well. Stay tuned, but it's more important for us to have civil, intelligent, respectful discourse of this nature. I really appreciate Chin Huat giving his thoughts to us. Please join us again. Please share. Please subscribe. Thank you and goodbye. See you.
Wait, can I get
Sure.
a message that you slip it in
Sure.
before you're ending?
Sure. Anytime.
This is to counter that part that why people don't come out to vote, right? So
Yeah.
you can slip it back earlier. Now, it's normal for you to think that it's pointless to vote, but let me put this to you. Whether you go out to vote or not, all those positions, 245 aduns, 6 MB, CM, 60 over EXCO, and so on, would be filled with or without you. What's the difference? The difference is that if you do not go out to vote, you let people who go out to vote to decide for you. Can you trust them? If you can trust strangers to make the best decision for you, then I would say just stay with Bamu. Don't bother yourself to queue up for half an hour and 1 hour. Pointless. It's
Right.
not a question that whether you can trust politicians. It's a question that whether you can trust stranger. If you cannot trust stranger, you should go out to vote, because at least if you cast your vote, whatever outcome, you have the right to complain later.
Thank you for the last word. Appreciate it. So hear it from Chin Huat, and of course, Goodbye. Cheers.
Bye.